Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Sinister Statue. The Isle of Wight had its share of mysteries, fog-drenched coastlines, abandoned manors, and whispers of ghostly apparitions. But nothing unnerved the residents of Ryde more than the statue in the town square. Officially titled the Sentinel of Time, the bronze figure depicted a cloaked man holding a lantern aloft, his face obscured beneath a shadowy hood. It had stood there for decades, its origins as murky as the seawater that surrounded the island. Holly Arnold had always been a skeptic. After returning to the isle to settle her late aunt's estate, she dismissed the local lore as just that, stories to scare children and entertain tourists. But one evening, as she strolled through the square, the statue captured her attention. The air around it felt wrong. The lantern, usually dim, seemed to flicker with a strange light, though no bulb or flame resided within. Holly stopped in her tracks, her breath clouding the unusually cold air. It's just a trick of the light. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The first warning. The following day, Holly visited the town archives to research the statue. The librarian, a frail woman named Mrs. Calthorpe, paled at Holly's request. You shouldn't look into it, she warned. The statue, it's cursed? Holly scoffed. That's absurd. Mrs. Calthorpe leaned closer. Anyone who sees it move is doomed. Their lives unravel. Some vanish, others lose themselves. She pressed for details, but Mrs. Calthorpe climbed up, muttering a quick excuse to retreat into the stacks. Holly decided to search for answers herself. She discovered scattered accounts in old newspapers, disappearances, unexplained deaths, and sightings of the statue moving. Some described its lantern glowing like a will-o'-the-wisp, leading witnesses into ruin. That night, Holly returned to the square, determined to debunk the legend. The second warning. The square was deserted, shrouded in thick mist. Holly approached the statue, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. She circled it, studying every detail, the folds of the cloak, the intricate engravings on the lantern. Then she saw it. The hooded head, fixed in bronze for decades, slowly turned to face her. Holly froze. The lantern flared to life, casting eerie shadows that danced across the cobblestones. A low hum filled the air, growing louder until it resonated in her bones. Panicking, she stumbled back and sprinted home, slamming the door behind her. She told herself it wasn't real, that exhaustion and stress were playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew better. The curse takes hold. Over the next few days, Holly's life began to unravel. Objects in her home shifted when she wasn't looking. Her reflection in mirrors seemed delayed, her face warped and unfamiliar. Strangers stared at her as though they knew something she didn't. She began to dream of the statue. In her nightmares, it stood at the foot of her bed, lantern blazing as a disembodied voice whispered her name. Each time she woke, the room smelled faintly of salt and decay. Desperate for answers, Holly sought out a reclusive historian, Edgar Bellamy, rumored to know the island's darkest secrets. It's not just a statue. It's a binding, a spirit trapped within, the curse to seek vengeance on the living. Holly demanded. Because you look too closely, the Sentinel doesn't tolerate curiosity. It involves confronting the statue and extinguishing the lantern with a concoction of salt water and ash. But there was a catch. Failure meant a fate worse than death. The final confrontation. Holly prepared the mixture, her hands trembling. At midnight, she returned to the square. The town was eerily silent, the air heavy with anticipation. The statue loomed ahead, its lantern already glowing. You won't win, Holly whispered, though she wasn't sure whom she was addressing. As she approached, the lantern's light intensified, casting the square in blinding brilliance. The hum returned, louder and more menacing. Holly felt herself being drawn toward the statue, her body moving against her will. Summoning all her courage, she flung the mixture at the lantern. The light sputtered and died, plunging the square into darkness. For a moment there was silence. Then an ear-splitting screech tore through the night. The statue cracked and crumbled, releasing a torrent of cold air that sent Holly sprawling. When she looked up, the statue was gone. Aftermath. The next morning, the townsfolk found Holly in the square, clutching the journal and covered in ash. She told them the curse was broken, but many were skeptical. Mrs. Calthorpe, however, seemed relieved. "You did it. But remember, some things should stay buried, though the statue was gone." Sometimes she awoke to faint footsteps outside her window and the distant flicker of a lantern. She had broken the curse. Or so she thought. Shadows of doubt. Life on the Isle of Wight returned to normal, but Holly felt anything but. Her neighbours no longer looked at her with unease, and the strange occurrences in her home subsided. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the statue or whatever inhabited it had left a mark. The dreams persisted. Every few nights she would find herself back in the square, standing before a shadowy figure. It wasn't the statue exactly, but something darker, more alive. The lantern glowed faintly in the distance, always out of reach. One evening, while organizing her late aunt's belongings, Holly found a letter she had never noticed before. It was tucked inside a battered leather-bound book about Isle of Wight folklore. The letter, written in her aunt's shaky hand, read, "Dearest Holly, if you found this, then it means the Sentinel has chosen you. I hope to spare you this burden, but it seems fate has its own plans. Be careful, my dear. The curse is never truly broken, it merely shifts its gaze." The words chilled her to the core. Her aunt had known about the statue, perhaps even experienced its curse. But why hadn't she ever spoken of it? The lantern's return. Weeks passed, and Holly tried to move on. She buried herself in work, attended town events, and even joined a local hiking group to distract herself. But no matter how far she ventured, the feeling of being watched never left her. One night, as she walked home from a late dinner, she passed through the now empty square. The place where the statue had stood was barren, the ground scorched as if by fire. She told herself it was just her imagination when she saw a faint light flickering in the corner of her eye. She turned, and her heart sank. The lantern was there, hovering mid-air, its glow weak but unmistakable. The hum returned, softer this time, like a whispering wind. "No," she muttered. "I destroyed you." The lantern floated closer. A shadowy figure began to form around it, indistinct but unmistakably human. "You freed me," a voice rasped. "But freedom comes at a cost." Holly turned and ran. A new guardian. The next morning she sought out Edgar Bellamy again. He listened grimly as she recounted the lantern's reappearance. The spirit wasn't destroyed. It was unbound. Without the statue, it's free to roam, but it still needs a vessel. With a vessel, it will seek another to carry its curse, perhaps. Perhaps it already has. No, I won't let this happen. There may be a way. A ritual to bind the spirit again, but it requires a willing sacrifice. For what kind of sacrifice? Yourself. Holly wrestled with the decision for days. She could try to run, leave the Isle of Wight behind, but deep down she knew it wouldn't matter. The spirit would follow, and others might suffer in her place. On a stormy night she returned to the square, Edgar at her side. They had prepared the ritual, candles, symbols drawn in chalk, and a vial of her own blood mixed with salt and ash. The lantern appeared almost instantly, its light brighter than ever. The shadowy figure loomed, its presence suffocating. "You seek to imprison me again." Holly stepped forward, her voice steadied despite her fear. "I'll be your vessel. Take me and leave this town in peace." The spirit hesitated. Then, with a deafening roar, it surged toward her. The light enveloped her, blinding and cold, and she felt a weight settle deep within her soul. The lantern fell to the ground, extinguished. A quiet guardian. Holly was never the same after that night. She became a recluse, rarely venturing beyond her home. But the town square remained eerily peaceful, free of strange occurrences. Some whispered that Holly had taken on the spirit's curse, becoming the island's silent guardian. Others claimed they occasionally saw her wandering the square at night, a faint glow surrounding her. Holly knew the truth. The spirit was with her now, always watching, always waiting. That as long as she bore its burden, the Isle of Wight would be safe. At least for now. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.